Hello everyone, I'm back with round 4 of the 2018 Chess Olympiad. We have a very anticipated matchup in this round between Fabiano Caruana and Viswanathan Anand. So the challenger versus the former world champion. And this match didn't fail to disappoint. It was a very exciting game. Caruana had the white pieces and Anand had black. So without further ado, let's jump into the game. Caruana opens with d4, we have knight to f6, c4, e6, g3, and here d5, so we have a Catalan opening on the board. Bishop g2, d takes c4, queen to a4 check, so white recovers this pawn. Knight b d7, queen takes c4, a6, so maybe preparing to push b5 with tempo on the queen. Here bishop to e3, and Black could play b5 in this position, but instead he plays bishop to d6. Getting one step closer to castling, we have queen to c2. So now b5 is no longer possible because then this rook would be hanging. Anand castles. Here knight to f3 seems like the most natural move in the position. But instead of this, we have knight to h3 from Caruana. So what's the idea behind this move? Well, white doesn't want to obstruct this bishop on g2. And also this knight can always reroute to f4. e5 from Anand, so now this bishop is free to develop on this diagonal. White castles, we have h6, a useful move, taking away the square from a knight or a bishop. We have d takes e5, knight takes e5, knight to c3, queen to e7, rook a to d1. It's always good to put your rooks on the open file. Rook to e8, so there might be some cases where black might have pressure on e2. Knight to f4, c6 from black, so this blunts the bishop's attack on b7 and also frees up black's bishop to develop. Bishop to d4, so Caruana is intending to push e4. And here Anand plays the move g5, so this looks like quite a risky move opening up the black king. His idea is that after knight to d3, which was what happened in the game, that he can develop the bishop to f5. But he didn't do this. Probably he changed his mind because after e5, bishop g6, white plays f4, so things are starting to get rolling for white in the center and on the king side. After knight takes, queen takes, white has a wonderful space advantage. Also this bishop is cutting across this wonderful diagonal. This looks quite dangerous for black. Here black cannot take on d4 because then f5 would win a piece. Well, let's see what happens if knight takes c3. Here you capture on g6, so the threat is to take on f7. And you could, if you play knight takes d1, then black is in huge trouble after g takes f7. King to f8, and here queen to g6. And the threat is to play queen g8. So you can give a check here, knight to e2, but after king to h1, here again g takes f7 is threatened. If black plays f5, simply queen takes f5. And here again queen to f7 is threatened by white. This is simply winning for white. So here we have knight takes d3 from Anand, excuse me. Rook takes d3, and here bishop to e5. Logical move, trying to trade off this dangerous bishop. You might be thinking, why not in this position bishop f5? Because this loses material for black. Here, white can play bishop takes f6. So the point is, if let's say queen takes f6, then here rook takes d6 wins for white. After queen takes rook, simply capture the bishop, and white has two pieces for the rook. And here if bishop takes d3, then you simply capture the queen. And at the end of the variation, again, white has two minor pieces for the rook. So that is why bishop to f5 is not possible. bishop to e5 from Anand challenging this bishop. We have queen to d2, so this steps out of any possible bishop f5 in the future, and also the queen is nicely eyeing this diagonal. Bishop to f5, Caruana pushes e4, the bishop drops back, and here we have f4 from Caruana gaining more space in the center. Bishop takes d4 would be probably the best move for black in this position. After rook takes, here rook a to d8 forces an exchange of rooks. And well, if anyone is better in this position, it is definitely white because of his space advantage. But bishop takes d4 gives black the most chances to fight for a draw. But instead of this, we have g takes f4 from Anand. After bishop takes, queen takes e5, g takes f4, and okay, white has very nice pawns in the center, but here the main problem with black's position is this weak pawn on h6. He always has to watch out for moves like f5, but more importantly, since there is no longer a pawn on g3, this rook can swing over to join in the attack. Queen to c5 check, king to h1. Black doesn't really have a good move in this position. If he tries king to h8, with the idea of getting out of the g file, then simply f5, and then you take the pawn. Therefore, in this position, Anand plays knight takes e4, trying to keep things complicated. But Caruana handles this very well. First, he takes the knight. Here, rook takes e4, and obviously not bishop takes e4, because after bishop takes, then here white would have to block with his rook. And black has ideas of king to h7 and bringing this rook over to join the attack. And also he can play f5 to simply cement this bishop on a nice central square. Therefore, rook to g3 from Caruana. White is threatening to play f5, and also this rook is on pre. So rook d4, the only move for black. And here if queen to f2, then black slips away after king to h8. If f5, then bishop to h7. So here Caruana plays queen to e3, maintaining the queen along this diagonal. And it was in this position that Viswanathan Anand resigned the game. Well, what happens if he tries king to h7, getting out of this pin? Here's simply f5. And if bishop takes, rook takes, and if queen takes, this rook is now undefended. Simply play queen takes, black can give a check, but here queen to g1 from white, and this, if the queens are traded off, then this is a winning endgame for white. And if instead of taking the pawn after f5, if black plays bishop to h5, then rook to h3 is simply lights out for black. After this bishop moves, then this pawn is on pre and black is going to get mated. This was the only decisive game of the matchup between the United States and India. So Fabiano Caruana is the American hero for round 4. A very nice result for Caruana after a slow start with 2 draws. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Do subscribe for more updates, especially on the Chess Olympiad. Thank you for watching and have a great day.